Hi, it's Rob from the Bush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to paint chip paintwork on Nurgle Blight King's armour. So prior to this I've used Citadel Elysian green, and then I've also washed it with Citadel Athonian Camoshade, and I'm just doing a quick kind of recap on how I did the armour on the Lord of Blights who I painted the other week. So we're going to give this another coat of Elysian green, then we're going to highlight it twice and then get onto the paint chipping. So we're now going to add some Citadel Nurgling green to the Elysian green, just to lighten that, and then we're just going to do a bit of a highlight on the armour itself. Now, as well as doing this video, I'm going to link in one that I did for chipping damage to orc vehicles a while back, because that uses the same principle as this, but it'll show you how to do scrapes and different kinds of paint chips too. But this one's more specific to the Lord of Blights type armour, where it's this kind of olive drab green almost. So once more we're putting on the final highlight, and then once you've got your armour highlighted, you know exactly where you're at, we can start doing the paint chipping. So with the final armour highlights done, now I'm going to move on to the chips. Now here I'm going to use Citadel Waaagh flesh. I'm going to start sponging on the bases for the chips. Now all you're doing is using a little bit of the blister pack packing sponge or similar. You put a little bit of the colour that you're using into your palette. You dab the sponge on, then you use a bit of paper to dab the excess paint off the sponge, and then you gently apply that so that you get that kind of chipped and uneven effect on the paintwork there. So you can see some parts of it thicker than others, some parts are quite small. Now this isn't the ideal green for it, probably something similar to Deathworld Forest, a bit darker than the Elysian green. This one's a bit too much of maybe a dark blue green, but it gives the right impression, and at the end of it, it does look okay. So you gently sponge this on, and when you're happy with the amount you've got, I do quite a lot on this just to give examples. You probably would do less than this, but when you're happy with the amount of little flecks that you've got on there, we'll move on to the next colour. So now we're just going to use some pure Nurgling green. What do you do for this is use a very, very thin brush. I'm using an Army Painter Wargamer character brush, and then you ever so gently do a highlight line underneath, on the underside of each of those little bits of Warboss green. So you can see here I'm doing a few small bits on the side there. Just ever so slightly do those little thin lines on just the underside. So if you've got an uneven spot or a line or kind of jaggedy edge to it, you are going to get all the highlights underneath the underside of those parts. So you're not highlighting the top edges. You can highlight some verticals if you want to, but you want to make sure that you're consistent in the ones that you're highlighting. So you'll be highlighting the underside, any angular ones which are going sloping upwards, you'd highlight the underside of them as well. But you'd never highlight the top edges, and you wouldn't highlight any of the straight up sides either. And the idea behind this is that this is the edge of the paint that is chipped, and the light is catching that little edge of that chipped paint. Now it is important when you do this, you've got a lot of little individual spots that you'll get as well. If you can try and get a tiny, tiny spot of the highlight colour underneath those chips, it does make the whole thing come together a lot more. If you just do it on the larger chips, then it's not going to look as good once it's finished, because you're going to have all these little individual dots all over the place. So you do want to make sure that you're highlighting underneath those little chips too. As well as this, because you've got that mottled effect on all of the Nurgle armour, so you've got those like kind of pock marks in the armour, you do want to highlight the underside of them, because that makes it blend in with all the paint chips as well, so you get the overall effect of the chips and the pock marks all coming together and having the same highlights so that it all looks kind of unified. Makes it look a little bit more natural maybe. So I'm going to continue adding these. I'm going to speed up the footage a bit because it's basically just more of the same. Then we'll move on to the next part once I've got all these underlines down. See here, doing lots of the little dots on the side there. Like so. So now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Mournfang Brown, which is a nice base for a kind of rusty look, if you want to go for that, or a bit of a weathered metal look. And all you're going to use is a very well pointed brush. I start off using a Citadel medium layer brush here, but then I change it to the Army Painter Wargamer character brush because that's got a better point for doing really fine detail work. And all you're going to do is you're going to add Citadel Mournfang Brown into the larger areas of Waaagh flesh, but trying to leave some of that Waaagh flesh around the edges of it. And the idea here is that when the paint is chipped, the areas where it's chipped a lot, you're going to have the Mournfang Brown showing through, and if it's just like a little nick out of the paintwork or a really small chip that hasn't gone too deep, then you're going to have that Waaagh flesh showing through as kind of the darker, maybe undercoat of paint beneath the olive green of the armour itself. So you want to try and keep the Mournfang Brown within the confines of the Waaagh flesh, and only paint the thicker areas of it. Now, as I say, there are many other ways that you can paint this rather than doing the Mournfang Brown in the gaps. I'm doing this because it's kind of tying the Nurgle rotting kind of rusted look together. You can, on the Orc video, use lead belcher or one of the Model Air chrome or silver to get that kind of streaked and scraped metal if you want to. I went for the brown look because it's the Nurgle look to have it all rotten, so if it was chipped it'd probably start rusting straight away and that kind of thing. I'll link up the Orc weathering, paint chipping and scraping video just so you can see how I did that, because it's the same principle, but obviously different colours and different kind of things because it's on a vehicle, so you've got a lot more scrapes and chafes on that. Here I'm also using a bit of the Mournfang Brown to go into all of these pockmarks in the armour. Again, that just ties it together with the inside of the chips that you've been painting. So while I'm finishing off these, I'm just going to speed up the footage and we can move on to the final part. Okay, so now that we've got this done, all we're going to do is add a few little straight line scrapes with Mournfang Brown, as though maybe a sword or something has chipped the paintwork. Now on the Lord of Blights video you saw some streaks like this across it and I did little runs coming from it. If you want to add the runs you can do if you want to. I just went for some straight slices into the armour because this video is concentrating on the chipping and not the overall weathering of that chipping. So if you want to see start to finish a piece of armour going from normally painted, then being chipped, then being corroded, I can throw that up as well, just let me know. But here again we're using Citadel Nurgling green, and like we did with all the paint chips, you're just doing a line on the underside of those slices, and that is like the light catching the lip of the slice. That gives it a nice highlight and gives it a bit of a 3D look, like so. So there you can see all the paint chips and the slices, how it's been chipped, and then the highlights applied underneath it, and that is how I would do the paint chips. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media, link below. Thanks very much.